Hey, Closet Busters, come on and gather around. It's time once again to kick down those closet doors of life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens, bold move expert and coming out coach, and I'm going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on, grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into living your truth as we explore more stories, tips, and tricks for living your life uncloseted. Now let's get to the show. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. It is time once again for another episode of Life Uncloseted, and welcome to January. I guess we're almost a couple of weeks into January already. And this show's a little bit targeted at a certain group of people. I felt like it would be really good to go along this permission route that we're going for this month. And, well, I really want to talk to gay men. Now, that doesn't mean you can't listen if you're not a gay man, because I think every time we do these kind of shows, people can learn anything from anybody, regardless of where it's targeted towards. But one of the things that I know for myself as a gay man was, and continues to be, finding ways to give myself permission to be who I am, to go do the things I want to do, and to not let other people's judgments get in the way. And ironically, I gave myself permission to reach out to somebody that we started following each other on Instagram and social media, and he's a coach, and I just started getting really intrigued with the stuff that he was posting, and he's from down under. And then I finally reached out to him and said, hey, I would love to have you on my podcast. And because we're both coaches and we both really talk to the people that are out there on the edges or the fringes. In fact, Enrique, he really focuses on those outlanders, the eccentrics, the odd ones in the world, and helps them become more authentic and really live the meaningful lives that they're meant to live. And of course, he loves working in the LGBTQ community, and he's a gay man himself. And I just thought, you know what? Let's kick off the year talking about why gay men don't give themselves permission to do stuff, and hopefully kick into gear some guys that might be listening to this to say 2019 is the year we're going to do some stuff. So from down under in Australia, I'm bringing my newest friend, Enrique Panameno, on to Life Uncloseted. So welcome, friend. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Rick.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here.
Me too. And I don't remember exactly how we got connected on Instagram, but I think you liked me or I liked you. And then we started following each other and seeing stuff. And actually the thing that piqued my interest was when you recently ran a gay men's workshop, like helping guys really step into who they are and how they want to show up in the world. So is this what, I know you have a corporate gig where you do coaching and stuff, but what was the draw to start going, you know what, I want to do some of this stuff with gay men? What was the big thing that drew you into that?
Yeah, but sorry, a lot of what I do stems from, my own personal calling to use coaching and positive psychology to help people who feel different. I focus particularly on the LGBTQ plus community. And basically this idea stems from my own personal experience. And I grew up in El Salvador, which is a very small Central American country. I now live in Sydney, Australia, so people here don't know where El Salvador is. I think in America it's very different.
Right.
But anyway, so what happened to me is that when I was a teenager, and I realized what my sexuality was, that was in deep conflict with my community and with the beliefs of my community and the beliefs of society around me. And as a consequence, I was put into conversion therapy. I did that for a couple of years, and that brought a lot of anxiety and a sense of hopelessness in my life. And then, eventually I realized that the only way that I could understand or overcome these issues was by going overseas, and I got a scholarship to study in Asia. Mm-hmm. I lived there for a long time, and I traveled to a lot of countries. And in my travels, I discovered coaching and positive psychology, and that really helped me to understand who I was. And I love the process so much that I decided to, make it my calling and my purpose, and I became a coach as a result. So I've always been particularly fond of the issues that gay men go through, mm-hmm. because I went through them myself, and the process of change that I went through was so fulfilling for me that I decided to help others. And this is where the idea of running these workshops come from, just spaces where men can feel safe to talk about their issues and find a better sense of self, a better sense of purpose, and, to find how to be more authentic beings.
You just hit on something, Enrique, that I think is pretty important in anybody's world, but especially when a gay man has gone through what he's gone through, and you're very similar to what I went through. I didn't go through true conversion therapy, but it doesn't make you feel safe. And when it doesn't feel safe to be who you are, then you don't really begin to deal with, call it issues, challenges, any of that stuff. And I think the key that you just brought up is creating that safe container, that place where no matter who you are or what walk of life you come from, that you can sit there and you can say, okay, these people they're making me feel good. They make me feel happy and comfortable that I can actually do and be the things I need to be to work through these challenges I'm facing. And a lot of gay men don't get that opportunity unless they give themselves permission to go do something like that. And I'm curious if you see that in the work that you've done, that when the men show up, it's either they're a little nervous most of the time, or they're like, yes, I'm finally doing this because this is important to me. I'm curious, how do the guys show up typically in these workshops? Is it a mixture of those two things, or is there something else?
Oh, well, they're incredibly nervous.
Yep.
You can tell from the get-go. I think there's just the fact that, and it's one of the things that I try to focus in the way I communicate these workshops, because just showing up, it's a huge step for them. I think that most of them don't show up because they're really nervous about it. And it's really interesting about how you talk about giving ourselves permission, because I think that we tend to focus on a consequence, or what would happen if I did this, and then we tend to have this image of what would I be if I showed up in a certain way, as a gay man to society, and that just generates a lot of fear.
Sure.
And therefore decide to just not show up. And I'm not just talking about the workshops, just in general, not show up in situations that will lead for us to be better people. And that's just that not showing up. I see it as a deliberate practice of, as a deliberate lack of self-love, I would say.
Well, it is, and it's this interesting space where to show up is very scary. To show up as yourself, to show up in that space of, okay, I'm not going to care what somebody else thinks. I'm going to be me. If you haven't been through or lived in an environment where people gave you that, where it's like, yes, I want you to be fully who you are. I want you to show up. And you've been filling your own head with, okay, well, this is what the expectations are, which we all live by expectations. I'm not saying this is some wonderful world that, you or I create for these guys, but it's a space of just come in, and to the best of our ability, we're going to work from a space of no expectations and no judgments. But the hardest part for most gay men, and I'm not saying lesbians don't have this, or transgenders or bisexuals don't have it either, but it's that piece of, okay, can I really trust that you really aren't going to pass judgment? Can I really trust that you are going to just see me for who I am? And do I trust myself to fully show up as who I am? I think that's a bigger piece of this, is how do I know to show up as who I am when I've been told for so long I can't show up as who I am? It's a huge conflict that I think happens for most of us.
It's a huge conflict, and you've made a really good point on trusting myself, because at the end of the day, I would ask, people who are probably listening to this and feeling a little bit nervous, it's, well, does it really matter if we can trust the other people? I mean, the most important thing is that we are able to show up. I don't think it really should matter what perception are we going to generate. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is also thinking about, if I do I really know who I am if I haven't showed up? you know, because our sense of identity can exist in our minds, but it doesn't come to life until we don't live according to it. So a lot of the time, you know, when we talk about authenticity and being ourselves, well, you're not yourself until you are yourself, and if you don't show up in a certain way, well, you're not that. And a lot of the times it's trial and error. We have an idea of who we are and we have an idea of what we want, but we won't be it until we step out and do it. And we're going to do it, and probably we're going to find that we're not entirely happy, and then we're going to make certain modifications and certain iterations until we find that spot where we feel comfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
So a lot of the time it's thinking, well, if I want to be who I really am, I just need to give it a go and do it over and over again until I find, you know, the sweet spot, and I find, okay, well, this is really who I am. You can't be it until you just put yourself out there.
And this is a huge piece of the puzzle. I think I remember when I was going through my coach training, and, you know, in other areas of life, but I really hit home when I was getting certified as a coach, and the question came up, who are you? And at first I was kind of like, I think the way most people react, like, screw you. What do you mean, who am I? I'm this guy, I do this stuff. Yes, that's part of the question. That's part of the answer. But when I started really going deeper and going, okay, am I just the gay man who came out late in life, or are there some values and are there some beliefs that I hold to be true for me that I've never revealed to anybody, that I've allowed other people's expectations and the way I was socialized to show up and say, this is Rick? And the more I started to step into that and started to challenge those questions and those beliefs and going, okay, what do I really value? That's when I started to see this is who Rick really is. And it took me to a space where I could stand in front of someone, and when they'd ask me who I am, I actually would say I'm the best version of myself I can be in each moment that I'm here. And sometimes that's going to be a guy who's really in integrity. Other time that's going to be a guy who can't keep from biting his tongue and lashes out in anger. But the real truth of who I am is that guy who gives himself permission to be in the moment who he's intended to be without second guessing or judging. Doesn't mean I'm always right. Doesn't mean I'm always good at it either. But it's such a big question. And I'm curious, when you propose that question to most people, like, who are you? What are some of the reactions you get from that?
Well, I think that you touched on a really good point on permission. Normally when people, when I ask people that question, they take a long time to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that they have to go deep in thought and they have to really think it through. And that only tells me that that's because they haven't really practiced, they haven't really put themselves out there enough. And that's because they haven't given themselves permission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even permission to be who they are. It's just permission to try,
mm-hmm.
permission, just permission to be open to the possibility of.
Or the permission to explore. I mean, much of what we do in life is that you get asked a question, and the human mind, the way I believe that we have been, trained, is as soon as the question get asked, it's like I have to have an answer. And even if as I asked that question to you, I knew it was a question coming at you kind of okay, he's not right. He's not going to know this is where I'm going. But there was a pause, and most people go, oh, the pause makes me so uncomfortable. No, the pause means you're actually giving yourself permission to go search for something that maybe you haven't searched for before, but it makes us so uncomfortable to be in that space because we're so accustomed to, in the moment, snap, answer, snap. And even as you're talking, while you're listening to someone else talk, you're already formulating what your response is going to be. And then they'll throw you a curveball. And it's like, well, shit, they just went a different direction. So now it's so interesting to watch us. And then we wonder why we can't really go below the surface to who exactly am I? Because we're so quick to processing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So in positive psychology, when you are working around in this arena, because I know a lot of listeners, I've had a couple of people talk about it on the podcast, but positive psychology isn't about be happy, be joyful, everything is good. That's not necessarily what it's really focused on, is it?
No, not really, no. So basically, positive psychology is the science of human flourishes, and just it's really a science that measures things such as, levels of satisfaction in life, hope, how happy you feel with certain situations. But it's just more using science and psychometric assessments to measure the levels, and also causing interventions in people's lives and saying, well, how am I going to focus on what's good so I can achieve what I want to achieve? I'll give you an example. So something that I do with my clients is that I'm a strong believer on people's strengths, and
Mm-hmm.
focusing on those strengths as opposed to weaknesses. So what we do is we do certain psychometric assessments,
Mm-hmm.
where they would get a list of the things that they are really good at.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is coach them to master those strengths. So instead of focusing on, what's wrong with you and how can we close those gaps, we focus on what's good with you and how can we make you a master on those abilities, and use those abilities to get you where you want to go in life. And it happens that a lot of us, or a lot of with gay men, a lot of our strengths, we tend to associate them with parts of identity that we either have repressed, or that we're not very proud of, or that we don't want the world to see. So it happens a lot with things such as creativity, or interests. We tend to just leave them on the side, or we don't tend to exploit them because we're afraid of what people will think. And so I try to do a lot of work in saying, well, if you're interested in being creative, it doesn't mean that you have to turn from an accountant into a painter.
Right.
Not that, but how are we going to use your creativity in your accounting job? Or
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to use your creativity in building better relationships for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the way I use positive psychology.
And it's such a powerful space. And what I've learned from the people I've been around in my world that are in positive psychology circles and practice and workshops and all that sort of stuff that they do, it is about the flourishing. I think so often when we try to do things, so I'll use an example of one of my clients who's really been struggling to get back out on the dating scene, and, he's focusing on, being in good shape. He's focusing on eating healthy, which are all great things. These are all pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. But then the moment he tries to get back out there, whether it's putting his, information up on a dating site, or going out with friends, mixing and mingling at a party, or, going to the bars, which is really the place that I'm like, okay, that's kind of like your last resort, buddy, to go hang out there. He starts to focus on, well, but, I'm too old, and, I haven't dated anybody in 6 years, and, people look at me and they turn their head away. It's all the stuff that's the negatives, instead of focusing on, okay, what is it you do really well? So a few weeks ago, we were having a conversation, and he said, I just have so many friends. And I knew this, and I've been waiting for him to bring something like that up so I could see if I could grab onto it with him and go. And I said, so if you have so many friends, what makes you a good friend? And what is it that you do in friendships that makes you attract people? And he started talking about it. And I said, okay, so now what would happen if you took all those skills, those things that make you a good friend and attracts people to you from a friendship perspective and brings you joy by being in friendship? What if you took those things and started to focus on those things as a way to bring a man into your life? And he got really, really quiet, because it was almost so simple, yet I knew it scared him a little bit. And his first words were, well, yeah, but friendships are different than dating. I'm like, I'm going to challenge you on that, because if you're not a friend with the person you're trying to date, and it turns, you want it to go to a long-term relationship, you kind of have to be in a friendship with that person you're trying to build a life with. And it was very fascinating to me to watch him go through this. So I'm curious, as you have seen that, do you see similar things happen where people are like, wow, I know these, the creative stuff or whatever. And then suddenly there's this moment where they're like, I didn't realize this was actually much kind of simpler than it needs to be, the way we complicate things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. And I don't only have seen it as a coach, I've seen it as a gay man, and I see it every day. I mean, I think it's something that it's very present, unfortunately, in our culture. I think that, it's that, I call it that automatic disqualification, like, hi, I'm Enrique. How are you doing? Nice to meet you. oh, I'm doing well, but I'm not so fit, or I'm not so fast, or I'm not so smart. And you start hearing all these things. And sometimes I just stop people and I said, well, why disqualify yourself so quickly? And especially, and I tell my clients, imagine that you're on a date and you sit down and you start to eat dinner, and the person you're dating, they start telling you how bad they are at work, or how unfit they are, or how incapable they are for certain things. Well, how are you going to feel after 15 minutes?
Right.
And almost always the answer is, well, I just want to leave. Well, why would I want to date someone like that?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, well, then why behave like that? So I think it's that culture of automatic disqualification, which is stemmed from a lot of it's from a sense of it's from that sense of not being able to be myself.
Yeah.
So here's where the permission piece, comes into mind and says, well, before I enter a room, any given room, before I enter, how am I going to step in? Am I going to step in feeling that I'm inferior than everybody else and that I'm going to be judged? Or am I going to step in with the permission I'm giving to myself of, I'm just going to give it a go, be who I am, and see what happens. And I love myself. I believe in myself. And whatever happens, it's going to be okay. So I'm just going to put my foot and the other foot across the door, and I'm just going to be who I am, and let's see what happens. And that's the experiment that we're going to run. And that's what I tell them. And it normally tends to give better a different perspective.
Yeah. One of my favorite Instagram posts that you did recently was, I think you were dancing, or it was about you being all sweaty in the kitchen and whatever. And I was like, this is what it means to really just put it out there. And go, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? And that's usually the question. People go, oh yeah, but what's the worst? I'm like, no, I want you to stay away from those kind of questions. I'm like, you're going to put this out there. You're going to be all sweat. And it's funny because I'll tell you in a minute why I laughed so hard at that one. But what would it be like to put it out there and go, okay, now what's the best possible thing that can happen by somebody seeing me be this sweaty mess and dancing and all this sort of stuff? Well, actually, it might be that somebody sees you and go, wow, if he can be that honest and out there, I wonder what he's like in person when we're just having a conversation. And too many people shy away from what's the best thing that can happen. And they go immediately for, oh, if I do that, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Or people are going to, suddenly we're in that whole negative spiral, and then they don't do anything. And then they don't find their way to give themselves permission to do anything. And the next thing they're not doing is they're not making some big, bold move they really, really want to make. And of course, then they're miserable because they're not living life the way they really want to. But,
And I think that the most important thing with these things is that the other people, they only care a fraction or not even care at all about what we do. So a lot of the time, we go thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen? And then I think that for that, the best thing is just to ask people. I mean, if you're really afraid of what other people will think of you or of the way you show up, just give it a go. Either ask or don't ask, just be it and just see people's reactions. And I think that 9 times or even more, 9.5 times out of 10, you'll realize that people won't even notice.
Right.
Sometimes you think, oh, I'm going to wear this particular shirt or this type of, or these shorts or this particular clothes. And, and people don't even comment because they just feel, oh, well, that's who they are. I'm not even going to, or people don't normally say anything if it's not to compliment. And if people are telling things that are negative, I would question the worth of hanging out with people who would notice and things like that. So I just think that the more it's deliberate practice, right? So you just have to do it over and over again, be yourself over and over again until you first realize that what others think, it's not really there. And the other thing is that you understand who you really are and what you want from life.
Yeah. And I just resonate so much with what you just said, because one of the things that went through my mind as you were saying that is we give so much power to other people who really aren't even asking for it. They're not waiting there going, okay, so give me permission to comment on how you look. Give me permission to comment about how stupid you are. And most of us aren't walking around going, okay, when Enrique comes on this podcast, I'm just going to wait for him to say something and then wait for him to give me permission to criticize him. No, that's not, I'm here listening to what you're saying going, okay, cool. And too often, and again, I'm going to come back to our gay brothers, we give away so much power by the expectation of trying to fit in with someone and trying to be part of, our gay culture in a certain way. And yes, certain groups, yeah, there's going to be certain groups that you try to fit in and some that you don't. But too often what I find is so many gay men give away all their power out of the expectation to fit in, when they could actually fit in if they would just really be who they are. And if they don't fit in with a certain crowd, then guess what, boys? That's not who you're supposed to be fitting in with. Go find the crowd you're meant to be with. Find the circle of friends and let that be who it is. And so back to the sweating thing, I sweat profusely all the time. That's just, when things happen, whether it's I'm exercising or if I'm like cleaning the house, and especially when I go to get on stage and speak, I know this is one of those things. And I was in Tokyo doing my TEDx, and in the middle of it, those who've seen it know that in the middle of it, I'm sweating, and I made a joke out of it and pulled out a handkerchief and wiped my head, and it's just kind of become that signature thing I do. What's interesting, though, is the more that I recognize and make it part of the acknowledgement, the less I sweat. It was in my own head that I'm thinking, oh, God, people are going to look at me. They're going to see this. They're going to see me sweating. Okay, now I know this is part of who I am. I acknowledge it. And the more I let that be acknowledged, not like I walk in the room and go, okay, folks, I'm here for this party. I'm just letting you know I'm going to sweat like a pig here in about an hour. No, it's more I acknowledge within myself, okay, I know this is going to happen. So I make sure I have some handkerchiefs. I make sure that I watch what I'm drinking if I'm at a party, because I know that certain things that I drink, if I drink too much red wine, that's going to cause it to happen. It's all these interesting little things. But most people don't care. Most people aren't looking for this stuff that we all worry about. And especially, again, gay brothers, we put too much emphasis on what we think everybody else is going to think of us. And that's just not a way to live. It kills us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, Rick, that, it's important to ask ourselves, well, why are we putting so much emphasis on what others think? Why do we care? And I think, and I've thought about it a lot. I have read books about it. And I think that at the end of the day, it's because we have this sense of, we want to belong. We want to fit in. We want to belong to something larger than ourselves. And that happens because we, growing up or at any given stage in our lives that we realize, okay, we're gay, we have to come out, we have to change drastically our lifestyle. That sort of, comes with a feeling of I don't belong where I am today. And therefore I want to be somewhere new. And when we step into the gay world, we realize that we don't belong either.
Right.
And then, belonging, it's about assessing a situation and becoming, or not belonging, but fitting in. It's about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. And I think that a lot of us become really good at this. I assess the situation. I am someone whom not to be accepted. We are accepted, at work, at school, but that's not what fitting in is never going to give us a true sense of belonging. I think that belonging, it doesn't require us to change who we are. Belonging requires us to be ourselves. So that's where the true belonging happens. Like if I assess a situation and I change, I'm never going to belong. But if I just step into a room being myself and giving it a go and giving myself permission to be who I am, that's when people start to see us different. And that's when they start to engage. And, at the end of the day, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. And I think that's a key idea that people need to understand.
And what you just said is really important. That sense of belonging is no greater than our sense of our self-worth. It's probably the hardest thing for most of us to get past. But if you want to belong, you have to belong to yourself first. You truly have to belong to you. And so many people struggle with this, especially gay men, that I find it's helpful to have them define, tell me what belonging really means to you. And then they'll come back with, no, I know that. I know it means wanting to fit in, to have friends, but tell me what belonging really means to you. When you belong, what do you feel? What do you experience? Have you ever felt like you belonged? A lot of people don't feel like they belong, so they can't even describe what the feeling feels like. So then I'll say, okay, if you could describe what you believe the feeling of belonging would feel like, what would that be? And the most interesting, consistent answer I get is feeling secure. Belonging makes me feel secure. And so it's an interesting space to start to do the work with people, especially gay men, is what do you want to do that would make you feel secure? Now we're starting to get somewhere. It's like, let's work towards this. Let's step into this. What are these things that we define? And again, we say these words like, oh, I want to fit in or I want to belong. We're just scratching the surface. We haven't gone underneath. Okay, but what does that really mean to you? Belonging could be, I don't want to wake up in the mornings anymore and feel like I can't get through the day unless I've got a circle of people around me. Belonging would mean I wake up in the morning and I'm totally good if the entire day I spend it with myself. And these are these interesting layers that as we start to peel it back, and yes, and I know Enrique's going to agree with what I'm about to say, it takes work, but it's the work that you put into it for yourself, not for other people.
Absolutely. And I think, like, as in everything, it's something that I try a lot with my clients, and it's, let's do baby steps. Okay. So just think, okay, in a meeting at work, I'm going to talk about something that I like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say something that, something about myself, just one thing, and just try to see how others react to it.
Right.
And it's about showing up, giving yourself the permission, during a meeting, if somebody makes a joke, well, I'm going to try and make a joke or something that I find funny, and I'll just see what happens. Sometimes the result is favorable, sometimes it's not. But I think that regardless, it's very liberating, because that's when you start to discover your identity. And I think a key point to understand is that we can't be who we are until we are it. We have to give it a go, and we have to practice. And it's not something that comes out by speaking once. We just have to do it over and over again. And that's when we're going to find our true identities.
I love that. I love that phrase, that we can't be who we are until we are it. And that's a pretty deep thing, but the more you give yourself, and so here we go, we're going back to this permission piece. The more you give yourself permission to go, okay, but what is my it? What is my who? What is it really? If I was and the extreme thing that I do with clients a lot is, okay, I want you to just imagine for the moment, you are the only person on the planet. Who would you be? What would be your it? There's nobody else telling you, you get to do this. The planet is yours. Who are you? And what is your it? And it's a really big question, because it takes you, just even as I say the question, and because I've used this numerous times, even on myself, I know the mind starts to roll like, wait, you're telling me I can't have anybody else's influence on this or anything? No, you just get to go do this. That's where true permission comes to, like, okay, I'm going to open up. I'm really going to go on this deeper exploration and figure this out, and give myself that true permission to say, okay, I actually can do this. I can actually go do this without somebody else's influence.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Enrique, before we wrap up stuff here, when you get this beautiful opportunity to work with gay men, especially gay men, since we're both kind of in that, we're both gay and we've done this work. What is the most common thing that you see that gay men struggle with? And I'm not talking about alcoholism and drug, and I'm talking about, what is something you see over and over when they show up to do this work? Is there some pattern you see? Is there a common feeling they have that, you're like, okay, been there, done that, seen this? Is there something that really crops up for you?
Yeah, I think it's very evident, and it's an underpinning fear, underpinning general fear of being ourselves, which really translates into a lack of self-confidence.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we are really good. I think gay people are really good in masking that, and like we can't really see it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But it's there, and it's it's that fear of being ourselves, and people don't know who they are because they don't even give themselves the opportunity to try. And that's definitely the common denominator for most issues, I think. And I think that's sometimes it's a cause for some of the things that you mentioned as addictions and things like that they just go into a threshold of probably more mental health related issues.
Yep.
But I think it's a lot of the time is that fear of not knowing who I am, because I'm afraid of of just being myself, and that stems from things like lack of self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think we're valuable. We don't think we're deserving of love and affection. We don't think that we're deserving of belonging.
Yep.
And then so we tend to do a lot of things, and we do great things, to be honest,
Sure.
to fill those gaps. So we become really good professionals. We become, great looking beings. We go to the gym, we buy really nice things, but the only, and that's all fine. But the issue with that is that we start to put our value or sense of worth in those particular things. So then, sorry, I become valuable because I have a great body, or I have become valuable because I have great things, or I become valuable because I'm really good at my job. But the thing is that what happens when these things goes away? What happens if I gain weight? So what happens if I lose my job? Then I lose my worth. And I think that's the big danger of falling into those traps. So
It's
I think
true. True. In fact, I just had a conversation with a client who's struggling at this stage, and he's definitely fairly new coming out of the closet, but he has defined himself early on as somebody who's really good sexually. He's like, I know I'm, the guys always tell me I'm such a great, lover, and it's always great sex with me. And now suddenly he's hitting a wall because his own value system is kind of catching up to him. He's like, but I want more than just sex. But he's defined himself so much by, I'm a really good lover. And he's struggling to have a more intimate relationship with guys because he doesn't know how to do that. And what's so interesting about it is he actually did the same thing when he was married to his now ex-wife. He was good at doing the things he thought he was supposed to be good at, but he didn't know how to connect. Yeah, he was really good at sex with her too. He's really good at his job, but he doesn't know how to do the other stuff because all this other stuff defined him. And so we're in this interesting space now where we're working on him giving himself permission to be vulnerable and to go, if I'm going to be good at intimacy, what do I need to do? And he is dating a guy right now who's kind of challenging that. And he's like, yeah, they've been on a few dates. They've only had sex. Okay, they've been on 6 dates. They've only had sex once. And of course he's freaking out. I'm not a good lover. That's why he doesn't want to do it. But then what I hear is the guy he's dating saying, I'd rather just spend some time and let's have some nights just sitting on the couch holding hands and, all this sort of stuff. And his, quote, new boyfriend finally said to him just recently, it doesn't always have to be about sex. And my client didn't know what to do with that because he's defined so much of his life about, I'm really good at sex. And so now he's starting to learn, back to our permission thing again, to give himself permission to go, I don't know how to do intimacy. I don't know how to focus on something else besides sex, making money, and holding these big positions. And so that's where we're working right now, is him giving himself permission to say, here's where I need help, or here's what I don't know, or here's what I'd like to experience. And I think this is the power of when you shift in your world into that positive psychology sort of stuff of, okay, now let's look at what you are good at. Now, how can we take you being really good as a lover or good at your work? How do we bring that into these other areas of desire so that you can thrive in those areas as well?
Yeah, and I think it's important to ask ourselves as well, if this thing that defines me, if it wasn't there, who would I want to be? And that a lot of the time that'll give us an idea of who we actually are. If I didn't have my job, who did I want to be? Who would I want to be? Or if I didn't have the body that I have, who would I want to be? And that'll give us an idea of where to start looking. At the end of the day, it's fine to have the things that we have, but we have to see them as a part of who we are. There's a lot of perspectives there. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Absolutely. So as we wind up here, Enrique, first of all, I've enjoyed this conversation, and I hope some of the guys that will listen to it, and ladies too, I know there's people listening, and those heteronormative people that always listen to my podcast, I hope you picked up some stuff. I know there's stuff there that all of us can learn. But before we sign off here, if you were to like want to just give one last piece of insight to anybody who is struggling to be who they are, what would be something you'd like to say or a starting point for them to start to explore that?
I think if I could say one thing would be use every opportunity you're in front of a mirror to look at yourselves in the eyes and just to tell yourself that you accept yourself for who you are right now and that you're safe. I think that's what I tell you.
Nice. I think that's a really great space for us to kick off into the new year, giving ourselves permission to use literally, as Enrique just said, every opportunity to look at yourself in the eye and let yourself know you're doing just fine and you've got everything that you have and need to go do that thing you want to do. So, and real quick before we sign off, we will have links to Enrique's website and everything you can get in contact with him. And trust me, you'll want to follow him on Instagram. It's one of the highlights of my days when I get to see his fun little Instagram posts.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Really fun to just to watch the energy and the fun stuff that you put out there and the great wisdom. It's been a joy of mine, getting to know you through Instagram and now getting the opportunity to actually have this conversation and just
thank you. It's mutual. Thank you very much, Rick.
So, all right, my friend, have a good day. Thanks for being on Life Uncloseted, and we'll be back with another episode in just a few days, folks. Take care.
All right, there you have it. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, but that's okay. We're going to be back in just a couple of days sharing more stories, tips, tricks, and wisdom for helping you live your life uncloseted. And you know what? You can share too. Just take a few moments if you like and if you believe in this podcast and share it with someone you know today. Share it from your phone, go share it on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you are. Maybe even give us a rating and review because you know what? It's all about the planet living their life uncloseted. I'm Rick Clemens, host of the show and the guy who helps you make those big, bold moves. And I hope you never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping in to living your life uncloseted. Catch you real soon. Take care, everyone.